How do you stay calm when you learn that the restaurant you helped build with $500,000 opened without you? How do you answer when your own daughter-in-law tells you that you were not invited because they only wanted their closest family and friends, and then calls you in panic about overdue bills? What do you say when everyone has treated you like a wallet, and you are the one who holds the contracts? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Martin, and I am 59 years old. I am a widower and a retired business owner. For 30 years, I ran a logistics company. Trucks, routes, warehouses, long spreadsheets full of times and numbers. That was my world. I was never the loudest person in the room, but I was steady. People came to me when something had to move from point A to point B on time. When I sold the company, I promised myself that the rest of my life would be calmer. I wanted to read, walk, and spend time with my son and my granddaughter. My son Daniel is 32. He is a chef. Since he was a teenager, he talked about food the way other boys talked about cars or sports. He worked hard, moved from one busy kitchen to another, and slowly built a name for himself. When he told me that he wanted his own restaurant, I felt proud and worried at the same time. I knew how hard business can be. He said that he dreamed of a place with an open kitchen, warm lights, and a menu that changed with the seasons. I decided that if I could help him build that dream, I would. That was how I ended up in Daniel and his wife Emma's small apartment one evening, sitting at their table with mood boards and sketches spread out between us. Emma is 30, full of energy and very sure of her taste. She talked about colors, fonts, and photos on social media. She said that the restaurant had to feel young and modern. She also said that it would be better if I was a silent partner, as she called it. She told me that guests might feel confused if they saw an older owner moving between the tables. Daniel looked embarrassed and tried to soften her words. I listened and nodded. I told myself that it was their place and that I did not need my name on the door. A few weeks later, I sat alone in my kitchen at home, looking at my laptop screen. On it was the confirmation of the transfer, $500,000, leaving my account and going into the new company account for the restaurant. It was the largest amount of money I had ever moved at once. I touched the rim of my coffee cup and thought about my late wife. Before she passed, she had always said that Daniel should do something he loves, even if it is risky. I told myself that this was a way to honor that. Daniel sent a short message to say that the money had arrived. Emma sent another message with a long list of ideas for plates, chairs, and a launch party. I noticed that neither of them asked how I felt after sending away half of what I had saved for my old age. In the early months, I visited the empty restaurant space while workers painted walls and laid tiles. I walked through the rooms with Daniel, and we talked about practical things. I pointed out that the storage room was small and that the delivery path might be tight for vans. Emma joked that I was still thinking like a logistics manager and said that guests would never see the storage room anyway. Sometimes she talked about the place as if it was only hers and Daniel's. She told a friend one day that they were founders of a new concept in our city. When I heard that word founder, it caught in my ear. I had never used that word about myself, but I knew what it meant. Later, social media pages appeared for the restaurant. The description said that it was created by a young chef and his partner, bringing fresh energy to the city. My name was not there. The photos showed Daniel holding plates and Emma smiling in front of unfinished brick walls. Under one post, someone asked how they had found the money for such a big project. Emma replied that they had found support in the family and that sometimes you just have to take a leap. I told myself that I did not need public thanks. I repeated that line many times. As opening day came closer, I tried to stay in the background the way Emma wanted. Still, I was excited. I imagined standing in a corner with a quiet drink, watching guests enjoy food my son had created. I pictured a moment where someone might clap Daniel on the shoulder and he might point across the room and say that his father had helped make this possible. It was a simple hope, nothing grand. I did not say it out loud to anyone. One afternoon, I sat in a small cafe across the street from the restaurant. From the window, I could see the new sign over the door and staff moving inside, carrying boxes and polishing glasses. I had arranged to meet Daniel there to talk about the last details. He arrived late, looking tired, with dark circles under his eyes. He told me that things were busy and that there had been some mistakes with orders. Then he lowered his voice and said that Emma and her parents thought my presence at the opening might make the place feel too formal. He said that they wanted a young atmosphere and that it would be better if I came by at a later time, maybe during a quiet weeknight. He tried to sound gentle, but the message was clear. I listened, stirred my coffee, and said that I understood. Inside, a part of me folded in on itself. On the walk back home, I replayed his words in my head. I I reminded myself that the restaurant was not about me. At home in my kitchen, I stood for a long time in front of the fridge without opening it. The house felt very quiet. In the corner was the chair where my wife used to sit and ask about my day. I imagined telling her that our son did not want me at his opening night because I would not fit the image. I tried to think how she would answer. I could not hear anything, of course. The only sound was the hum of the fridge and the ticking of the clock on the wall. Days passed. I kept expecting a message with an invitation. I thought that maybe they had listened to me more than they showed and that there would be a place for me, even if it was small. Instead, the only updates I saw were online. The restaurant's page posted stories about menu testing, table setups, and a soft launch. The phrase soft launch appeared one morning under a photo of guests holding glasses and smiling. The lighting was low and warm. I recognized Emma's parents and some friends of theirs. I did not recognize anyone from my side of the family. I stared at the photo for a long time. A week later, I went back to the same cafe across from the restaurant. I told myself that I just wanted to see the place open. I ordered a coffee and sat by the window. The restaurant door opened and closed every few minutes. Staff carried out bags of trash. A couple took a photo in front of the sign. After a while, Daniel came out with a box of empty bottles. He saw me through the cafe window and came inside. We spoke a little about how busy it had been. I asked how the opening had gone and when it would be. I thought he would say that they were still planning the official night. Before he could answer, Emma walked in behind him, still in a dress from the lunch service. Emma smiled in a bright, practiced way. She told me that the opening had been a week ago. She said that they had invited their closest family and friends and that it had been a beautiful night. She added that they had thought I would feel tired and that they did not want to bother me. She spoke as if this decision had been a kindness. I listened. At first, the words did not even reach me fully. Closest family. I counted in my head how many chairs there were at the table in my kitchen. Those chairs were empty most nights. I did not argue. I did not raise my voice. That is not in my nature. I told them that I hoped the opening had gone well and that I wished them full tables every evening. Emma moved on quickly to talk about how the place already had good reviews online and how people liked the style. Daniel watched my face but did not say anything. I finished my coffee and told them that I would let them get back to work. I went home, step by step, feeling heavier with each block. That evening, I sat again at my kitchen table. I opened the family group chat on my phone. There were photos from the opening night. Daniel in his white jacket, Emma in a new dress, Emma's parents raising glasses, friends with plates of food. Under one photo, Emma had written that it had been a special night with the people who really believed in them. I read that line several times. I knew, in my mind, that people can write careless things online. Still, that sentence cut more than her words in the cafe. Belief for me had been $500,000 and many quiet talks. For her, it seemed to be something else. I put down the phone and stared at the other chair at my table. In my head, I saw my son standing in his kitchen, sending out plates as if nothing was wrong. I told myself that I would not act out of anger. I have seen what anger does in business and in families. You can break more than you fix. I reminded myself that I had chosen to be a silent partner. Silence, however, felt different now. It no longer felt like a calm choice. It felt like being erased. As I sat there, my phone vibrated again. The screen lit up with an unknown number. I almost ignored it, thinking it was some sales call, but then I pressed accept and held it to my ear. A calm male voice asked if he was speaking with Martin Hale, the main contact and guarantor for the new restaurant. When I said yes, he introduced himself as the manager of a food supplier. He said that he wanted to check whether I knew that the first invoice for the restaurant was already overdue. That was the moment when something inside me stopped just hurting and started to pay close attention. The man on the phone sounded polite, almost careful. He explained that he was the account manager for one of the main food suppliers. He said that the restaurant's first invoice was already overdue. He also said that my name was on the documents as guarantor and main contact, so he felt it was right to inform me. I sat very still at my kitchen table while he spoke. I asked him for the invoice number, the date, and the amount. I wrote everything down on a notepad next to my coffee cup. I told him that I would look into it and get back to him. When I ended the call, I kept the phone in my hand for a moment and listened to the quiet house. The word guarantor stayed in my head. I remembered signing papers at the bank, but at that time I had trusted that Daniel and Emma would be careful. They had promised to treat every euro with respect. Now, that first outside sign of trouble had arrived not even a month after they opened the doors without me. Looking at the numbers on the page took me back to an earlier day in the same bank. I saw myself walking into a small meeting room with glass walls, Daniel at my side. Emma and her parents were already seated inside. There were bottled waters on the table and a folder with the bank logo. The banker greeted me with a firm handshake and said that it was nice to see someone with a long business history helping the next generation. He explained the structure of the loan that would sit next to my private investment. He then walked us through a shareholder agreement and a set of guarantees. My lawyer, Alicia, sat next to me, taking notes and asking quiet questions in a calm voice. Alicia pointed out certain lines to me, and the banker waited while I read. There were clear numbers on who owned how many shares in the new restaurant company. There were also paragraphs about what would happen if the company missed payments or if the managers did not follow agreed rules. I remember that Emma looked bored during those parts. She whispered to her mother about interior ideas while Alicia and I read. Daniel tried to follow, but he kept glancing at Emma for approval. At one point, the banker smiled at me and said that I was wise to keep things clear on paper with such a large amount. He said that many people mixed family and money without any written structure and that it often ended badly. When it was time to sign, Emma sat up straighter. She liked the part where the banker talked about new founders and a modern concept. Her parents smiled as if the room belonged to them. I signed as majority investor and guarantor for certain payments. Daniel signed as manager. Emma signed as co-director. Her parents did not sign anything, they simply watched and nodded. After we left the bank that day, we walked to the empty restaurant space together. It was still full of dust and tools. You could see the bones of the place, the pipes and wires. I liked that part. It reminded me of new warehouses before the first trucks arrived. Emma walked through the future dining room and spread her arms wide. She talked about how she would host food writers there and how her restaurant would photograph so well. I walked into the kitchen space with Daniel. We measured where the stoves would go, where deliveries would enter, where waste would leave. I told Daniel that the delivery path looked tight and that they might need to change the position of a door. He listened, then went to check with the contractor. When he came back, he said that they would adjust it. In those small moments, he still treated my advice as worth something. Over the next weeks, that feeling changed step by step. I watched it happen in small interactions. Emma would post updates from the site on social media and talk about our project and our vision when she wrote. She never added a line about my role, even though she described the type of tiles in detail. Under one post, a friend asked how they had managed to start such a big place. Emma answered that when you truly believe in yourself, the universe sends support. I remember reading that and feeling like I had become part of the word universe. Another time, at their apartment, I brought a simple spreadsheet I had made. It showed projected costs and a few scenarios if the first months were slower than planned. I told them that in my field, we always prepared for delays and surprises. Emma looked at the sheet and said that numbers stressed her out. She said that she wanted to focus on the guest experience, not on old-style business thinking. Daniel smiled weakly and said that he would look at it later with me. The papers stayed on the table when I left. I am not sure if he ever picked them up. The clearest sign of how they told the story to others came at a dinner at Emma's parents' house. They had invited some friends and relatives to celebrate the upcoming opening. Their dining room was large and filled with soft light. There were framed photos on the walls of Emma as a child in various school performances. I did not see any photos of Daniel. During the meal, Emma's father, Robert, tapped his glass with a spoon and said that he wanted to say a few words. He talked about how proud he was of Emma and Daniel for stepping into the world of business. He called them brave and modern. He said that the restaurant was their way of bringing new energy to the city. At one point, he mentioned me as someone who had helped with some starting funds. People nodded politely in my direction and then turned back to Emma when she laughed and waved her hand. I did not expect a long speech about me. I am not that kind of man. Still, the way he spoke made my role sound like a small loan for a vacation. I sat there with my hands folded and thought about the $500,000 already moving out of my account. I told myself to stay calm, to remember that this night was about them, not about me. That thought became a kind of mantra in that period. After dessert, I stepped out onto their terrace for some fresh air. Daniel joined me. I told him quietly that I was happy for him and that I hoped the restaurant would be a place where he could grow for many years. I also told him that it felt strange to hear my role described in such a light way. He shifted from foot to foot and said that his in-laws liked things to sound simple. He said that it was easier for them to tell the story that way. He promised that he would make sure I felt included. Looking back now, I notice how many times I accepted small cuts like that. Each one seemed harmless by itself. Emma talking about her brand. Emma's parents calling the restaurant Emma's Step into Business. Social media posts that showed only 2 founders. My name sliding out of every frame. I let all of it pass because I wanted my son's dream to live. I thought that I could stand a little discomfort for that. The call from the supplier pulled all those memories into one line. Guarantor. Overdue. I looked down at the notepad and saw my own handwriting, still precise, still clear. I realized that the outside world did not see me as a distant relative or a silent cheerleader. On paper, I was the main responsible adult. The next day, I called Daniel. I did not raise my voice. I told him that a supplier had contacted me about an unpaid bill. I asked if there was some mistake. He sounded tired and said that there had been a few slow days and that they were waiting on some transfers. He said that Emma was talking to her parents about bridging money. He also said that he did not want me to worry. When I asked him if he knew my name was on the documents as guarantor, he paused. He said that the banker had explained it once, but that Emma had said it was just a formality. He repeated that word, formality, as if it could soften the fact that someone already saw me as the last line for their overdue debts. After that call, I went to my home office. It is a small room that used to be a storage space. I have a simple desk there, a cabinet, and a metal drawer that locks. Inside the drawer are folders from my old company and the new restaurant project. I took out the folder with the bank logo and put it on the desk. I did not open it yet. I just let it sit there while I made myself tea. I remembered the way Emma had called me a silent partner that first night at their apartment. At the time, the phrase had sounded modern and neat. Now, it sounded more like silent witness. I told myself that silence had limits, especially when my name and my savings were tied to other people's choices. That evening, I checked the restaurant's page again. There were new photos from the soft opening, long tables, candles, plates of food. I saw Emma's parents, some of their friends, a few local influencers I recognized from the city's newsfeed. Under one photo, Emma had written that the night had been perfect, surrounded by the people who really believed in them. That line settled on top of the earlier words in my head like an extra weight. I put the phone face down on the table and tried to read a book. After a few minutes, the phone vibrated again. This time it was Daniel sending a short message in the family group chat. He wrote that the soft opening had gone great and that now they were planning the official launch event for press and partners. Many hearts and happy faces appeared from Emma's friends and family. I scrolled through the messages and saw Emma's excited comments about how it would be the moment when they truly step into the spotlight. I saw her parents talking about outfits and guest lists. I kept scrolling, looking for a line that mentioned me, a small note that my name was on the list. There was nothing. The more I read, the clearer it became that the official launch was being planned around me, not with me. As I sat there, the screen lit up again with a new message in the same chat. Emma wrote that the official launch date was set and that invitations would go out the next day. She added that it would be a night for our core team and real partners. I watched those words appear, and my eyes moved slowly back to the closed folder from the bank on my desk. The next morning, the group chat was still active. People were sending suggestions for music and decorations for the official launch. I scrolled without writing anything. In the middle of the messages, Emma wrote that this event was especially important because, in her words, it would show that their project was fully in the hands of the young generation. She added that older relatives could come by another time for a quiet dinner after things settled down. I stared at that last line. It felt like a second layer on top of everything else I had seen and heard. First, the soft opening without me. Then, the way my role was described only as background. Now the main launch was being framed as a circle of real partners, with a promise that one day I could come by like a regular guest. I put the phone down face down on the table and tried to decide if I was being too sensitive or if I was finally seeing the pattern clearly. A few days later, Emma's parents invited everyone to their house again. The official launch was still ahead, and they wanted another dinner to celebrate the momentum, as they called it. Part of me did not want to go, but I went anyway. I told myself that staying home would not help anything. When I arrived, the house was bright and busy. People stood around with glasses in their hands, talking about the restaurant as if it was the main topic in the city. During the meal, Robert made another toast. He spoke about how proud he was that Emma and Daniel had built something on their own. He used that phrase several times. He said that now the business was fully in their hands and that the future belonged to them. I watched the faces around the table. I could see that almost everyone there accepted that story as complete. To them, I was just another older family member at the edge of the room. Later, after dessert, I stepped out onto the patio again. The air was cooler outside. The garden lights gave everything a soft glow. Daniel joined me, holding his glass. I told him in a calm voice that it hurt to hear phrases like built on their own when he knew how much I had put in. I also told him that it felt strange to be treated as someone who might receive an invitation someday, instead of as the person whose support had made the place possible. Daniel looked uncomfortable. He said that Emma and her parents liked to keep the story simple, and that talking about investors and contracts made people less excited. He said that putting too much focus on me would make the place feel less fresh. He added that for the launch, they wanted the room to look like a group of young founders with their direct partners. He said that I could come a week later and that they would make it special for me then. I listened and let him finish. I did not argue with him. Instead, I asked him if he believed that giving me a later, private evening made up for keeping me out of the first two big moments. He did not answer right away. He stared at his glass and finally said that he was trying to balance many things. Then he repeated a phrase I had heard before, that he did not want me to feel out of place. It was clear to me that he had been hearing the same phrase from Emma and her parents. On my way home that night, I felt less confused than before. The sadness was still there, but something sharper had joined it. It was a kind of quiet understanding. I saw that in their minds, I was useful when money was needed and invisible when image was built. That combination is dangerous. I had seen it in business before, in other families, in other partnerships. It always ended in the same kind of mess. The next afternoon, I met my granddaughter Grace at a small park near her school. I try to see her at least once a week. We sat on a bench near the playground. She told me about school, about a project, about a teacher she likes. Then, in a simple voice, she asked why I was not at the restaurant party with the balloons. She said that she had seen photos on her mother's phone with many people and that she had looked for me in the pictures but could not find me. I told her that sometimes grown-ups have different events and that I had not been invited to that one. She frowned and said that this was strange, because I was always the one who talked about the place becoming real. Then she asked why my photo was not on the wall at the restaurant like Emma's parents' photos were, because she had seen those when she visited. That question sank into me. Children have a special way of pointing directly at what is wrong without even trying. I did not have a good answer for her, so I said that sometimes people forget things and that we have to remind them. She seemed to accept that. She ran off to the swings. I sat there and watched the children play and thought about who had the right to forget and who had the duty to remember. By the time I walked back home, the line in my mind between simple hurt and a deeper decision had become very thin. At home, I went straight to my small office instead of the kitchen. I unlocked the metal drawer and took out the folder with the bank logo again. This time, I did not let it sit closed. I put it in the center of the desk, sat down, and opened it. The smell of paper and toner met me, familiar from years of reading contracts and shipment forms. On the first page, there was the summary of the share structure. My name was there with 65% next to it. Daniel's and Emma's names followed with much smaller numbers. On other pages, there were paragraphs about management rights, duties, and what would happen if the company did not meet its basic obligations. There was also a section that clearly described what it meant to be a guarantor and under what conditions that role could be changed or ended. As I read, I felt my breathing slow down. I was not surprised by the content. Alicia had warned me about these lines from the start, but back then they had seemed theoretical, almost like safety rails that you never planned to touch. Now, with the call from the supplier in my memory and the photos of the opening in my mind, those lines felt very real. I saw, written in formal language, that I was not just a distant helper. On paper, I was the person who carried the final responsibility and also the final authority. I closed the folder halfway and leaned back. I thought about the word silent again. Silent partner, silent supporter, silent older relative. I realized that silence had been my choice up to this point, but that the documents did not expect me to be silent forever. They gave me tools and paths to act if things went wrong. I did not yet know what that action would be, but I knew that a point had come where doing nothing would also be a choice with consequences. I was still at the desk when my phone began to vibrate. Emma's name appeared on the screen. I watched it for a few seconds before I picked up. When I answered, she went straight into her reason for calling. Her voice sounded tight, as if she had been holding herself together for some time. She said that several bills had come due at the same time, that a supplier was pressing, and that the landlord had sent a reminder about rent. She said that this was normal in the early months and that they just needed another push to get through the slow period. Then she said that she assumed I had already transferred the next amount we had talked about. I sat up a little straighter. I asked her what amount she meant exactly, and when we had agreed on it. She sounded annoyed and said that at one of the early meetings we had spoken in general about my support over the first year. She said that in her understanding, this meant I would keep covering gaps until the place was stable. I told her, still calmly, that any specific amounts had to be written down and agreed by both sides. I also reminded her that this was not a small family dinner, but a business with contracts. She did not like that word. She said that she did not want to bring cold legal talk into family matters and that she preferred to speak about trust. She added that her parents were already doing their part with advice and with helping the image of the place, and that it was only fair if I did my part with money. As she spoke, my eyes moved back to the paragraph about management duties and financial responsibility. I let her words pass through me, but this time I did not take them in as orders. I heard them as what they were, attempts to pull more from me while still deciding where I was allowed to stand. She said that if I did not act quickly, staff might leave, suppliers might stop deliveries, and the new reviews online might turn negative. She said that this would be a shame after all their hard work. The way she spoke made it sound as if my hesitation would destroy everything, while the choices that led to unpaid bills were just a small detail. For a long moment, I did not answer. I looked at my own name printed on the top of the pages in front of me. I thought about my late wife, about Grace's question in the park, about Daniel's face on the patio when he repeated that I might feel out of place. I felt something inside me become very still. It was not anger. It was not even sadness anymore. It was clarity. I realized that they did not see me as a person with limits and rights, only as a resource. They did not mention me when they celebrated success, but the moment systems outside their circle started to press them, they called me. They wanted the benefit of my formal position without giving me the basic respect that should come with it. Into that stillness, a simple decision arrived. I would not send another cent without understanding every detail and without using every tool that the agreements gave me. I would not shout or threaten. I would do what I had always done in my career. Follow the rules that were written, document every step, and move through the systems that other people had agreed to respect on paper. I brought the phone closer to my mouth and told Emma, in a steady voice, that we needed to talk in person about money and agreements before any further transfer. I said that I wanted the next talk to take place at the bank, with the documents on the table. On the other end of the line, I heard her take a sharp breath. She started to say that such a meeting was not necessary, that it would slow things down. I repeated that this was how I would proceed. When the call ended, I set the phone down next to the open folder. The house was quiet again. I took a pen and underlined 3 lines in the agreement, very slowly. Then I opened my calendar and circled the next free morning in red. On the morning I had circled in red, I woke earlier than usual. The house was still dark. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with the folder from the bank in front of me. I did not add anything to it. I simply checked that every document was there. Then I put it in my bag and left for the meeting. The bank was busy, as always. People moved in and out with folders and phones. I walked to the same small meeting room with glass walls where we had signed the first papers. This time I arrived before anyone else. I sat down, placed my bag on the chair next to me, and waited. Daniel and Emma came in together. Daniel looked tired. Emma looked tense, but tried to smile. She said that the situation at the restaurant was normal for a new place, that there were always cash flow swings. She said that we should not overreact. I told her calmly that I only wanted to understand the numbers. The banker arrived and greeted us all. He looked a little more serious than during our first meeting months before. He asked what he could do for us. I said that I wanted to see recent statements for the restaurant account and for the loan. I also said that I wanted to make sure everyone understood who was responsible for what. I kept my voice neutral. The banker looked at Emma and Daniel, then at me, and then he nodded and printed documents from his computer. We sat in silence while the printer worked in the corner. I watched Emma shift in her seat. Daniel stared at the table. When the banker came back with the papers, he placed them in front of me first. There were lines of numbers, dates, and short descriptions. I saw the $500,000 I had sent at the start. Then I saw how it had gone out again. The amounts were not small. A large sum had gone to interior design, another to a marketing agency. There were transfers to event organizers and to small companies that, from their names, looked like providers of decorations and online promotion. There were also regular amounts for food and for salaries, but they were not the main part. I traced the numbers with my finger, moving slowly. I asked the banker to point out which payments were linked to the loan and which to the restaurant's own income. He did so carefully, perhaps sensing the tension in the room. When I asked about the supplier invoice that had triggered the call to me, he found it and showed that it had not been paid yet. He confirmed that reminders had been sent. He also said that, since my name was on the guarantee, the supplier was within his rights to contact me. Emma said that the supplier was impatient and that this was unfair. She added that if I would just send the next amount we had talked about, all of this would be easy to solve. I replied that we had not agreed on any specific next amount. I also said that I wanted to speak with my own accountant and my lawyer before I decided anything. Daniel did not say much. He looked smaller in his chair than I had ever seen him. After we left the bank, we stood together just outside the door. Emma said that bringing lawyers and more paperwork into this would only slow everything down and make the atmosphere heavy. She said that we should keep it in the family. I answered that the moment they put my name on legal documents and used my money, it stopped being just a feeling and became a structure. I told them I would be in touch after I had spoken to my advisors. Then I turned and walked away. My next stop was the office of my old accountant, Ken. I had known him for 20 years. His office smelled of paper and coffee, just like I remembered. He greeted me warmly and asked what brought me in. I laid the bank statements on his desk and told him the story, from the first investment to the soft opening without me, to the call from the supplier, to the meeting at the bank that morning. He read the statements carefully. He circled a few numbers with his pen. He said that he saw a pattern he knew well. Too much money on image, not enough on basics. He pointed at the unpaid invoices and said that this was a warning sign, especially so early. He also reminded me that as guarantor, I was at risk if the company failed to meet its obligations. Then he added that I was not without tools, because I was also the main owner. I asked him what he would do in my place. He told me that he would not send more money into a structure that was already leaking it in all directions. He said he would look again at the agreements and see what rights and protections were built into them. He also advised me to speak to Alicia, my lawyer, as soon as possible. He said that calm and clear steps now might prevent a lot of pain later. That afternoon, I went to see Alicia in her modest office downtown. The walls were lined with folders. Her desk was neat. She listened without interrupting while I told her everything that had happened since we first sat together at the bank months ago. When I finished, she folded her hands and asked to see the documents again. She read for a long time, page by page. She marked certain parts with small sticky notes. Then she explained the structure to me in simple terms. She reminded me that I held 65% of the shares. She pointed to a clause that described what could happen if the company did not meet its basic financial duties or behaved in a way that put partners at risk. She also showed me a paragraph that said, the guarantor had the right to review, and in some cases, limit future obligations. She did not tell me what to do. She never did. Instead, she laid out possible paths in front of me, like a careful map. One path was to send more money and hope that habits changed. Another was to use my rights as majority owner to change how the restaurant was managed. Another was to step back as guarantor under certain conditions. She said that none of these paths had to be chosen that day, but that I should not ignore the fact that the situation was already pressing. I asked her what would happen if the restaurant could not pay its rent or its suppliers. She said that the landlord and suppliers would naturally look to the person whose name was on the agreements. Then she looked me in the eye and asked me a gentle question. She asked whether the way Emma and her parents treated me matched the level of responsibility I carried on paper. I knew the answer without thinking. On another day that week, I visited the office of the main food supplier who had called me. It was in a warehouse area on the edge of the city. Inside, the office was plain but clean. The manager who had called me came out to greet me. He seemed relieved that I had come in person. He explained that they liked working with Daniel in the kitchen, that the staff seemed good, but that invoices had not been paid on time. He said that the only reason they had kept sending deliveries was that my name was on the paperwork and that they trusted my record from my old company. He said that he did not want to pressure me, but that his own company had rules to follow. I told him that I understood. I asked him to show me the unpaid invoices and the payment terms. He did. I looked at the dates. Some were already late. Others would come due soon. I told him that I could not promise anything on the spot, but that I was taking the matter seriously. I also said that I appreciated that he had called me directly instead of simply cutting off deliveries without warning. On the way out, I felt something I had not felt in a while, the sense of being treated as a responsible partner, not as a background relative. From there, I went to the office of the landlord who owned the building where the restaurant was located. The property manager met me in a small meeting room with a large map of the city on the wall. She pulled out the lease and reviewed it with me. She confirmed what Alicia had already said. The lease was in the name of my holding company. The restaurant company was listed as a subtenant. She told me that rent had been paid so far, but that they had noticed the late payment of the last month. She said that they usually gave a little grace period, but that they expected clear communication. Then she mentioned a clause that allowed the main tenant, my holding company, to end the sublease if the subtenant failed to meet their duties. She said that if such a step was ever taken, they would work with me directly on the next arrangement for the space. I left her office with a clear picture. On paper, I was not standing outside my son's dream, looking in through a window. I was, in fact, holding most of its structure in my hands, even if I had let go of that feeling in my heart when I accepted the idea of being a silent partner. The outside world, banks, suppliers, landlords, all saw me as the point where responsibility and authority met. Over the next days, Emma's messages did not stop. She wrote to me often, sometimes friendly, sometimes sharp. She said that delays were normal. She said that staff would lose trust if they felt the money side was weak. She said that if I did not support them fully now, people would say that I had walked away from my own son. In the family group chat, she shared more happy photos from the restaurant and made light jokes about older people not understanding how modern business worked. I read every message, but I did not answer all of them. When I did answer, I stayed calm. I said that I was reviewing the situation. I said that business and family feelings could exist side by side, but that they could not replace each other. At night, I sat at my desk and made notes. I wrote down names, dates, invoice numbers, and short summaries of each meeting. It was my old habit from my logistics days. Keep the record clear, no matter how people feel on top of it. One evening, as I was finishing a page of notes, my phone buzzed on the desk. It was Alicia. She said that she had reviewed everything again, and that, in her view, I now had enough information to make solid decisions if I chose to act. She said that I did not have to rush, but that I should not let other people's urgency push me into blind transfers. I thanked her. After the call, I sat for a moment in the quiet room and listened to the faint sounds from the street outside. A few minutes later, while I was still at the desk, another notification appeared on my phone. It was a group email from Emma, addressed to key partners and close family. In it, she announced an urgent strategy dinner at the restaurant. She wrote that they wanted to calm concerns, share their vision, and show that everything was under control. As I read, I noticed that my name was on the list of guests, along with Emma's parents, a few suppliers, and some people she had called advisors in earlier posts. The email from Emma sat at the top of my inbox for a long time before I opened it again. Urgent strategy dinner, the subject line said. The body of the message tried to sound positive. She wrote that she wanted everyone to come together, to hear their plan, to share confidence. She said that they would use the evening to show that the restaurant was on a clear path. Between the lines, I could feel the pressure. I read the list of names. Emma's parents, a few suppliers, one or two people I knew as local consultants who liked to be near new projects, some early staff members, and me. For the first time, I was included in their circle on paper. Part of me wanted to refuse. Another part knew that this was the first time they were bringing all the people who mattered into one room. That alone made the evening important. Over the next days, I went back to my old habits. In my office, I spread out my notes, bank statements, and a copy of the company structure. I did not draw a revenge plan. I do not think in those terms. I simply asked myself what any careful owner would do if this were not his son and his daughter-in-law, but just another struggling branch of business. I wrote questions in the margins. I circled dates. I listed which people were at risk, staff, suppliers, landlord, and then, last on the list but still there, myself. I met Ken again for coffee in his office. I asked him in plain words if I could cover the basic debts of the restaurant if I needed to, without putting my own living costs in danger. He checked my numbers and said that I could, as long as I stopped pouring money into the same hole without changing the edges. He said that helping staff and honest suppliers survive was one thing. Feeding the same pattern of careless spending was another. He reminded me that I did not owe Emma's image anything. I owed only what I had signed, and even that had lines of protection. I thanked him for the clarity. It helped to hear another person separate feelings from structure. When I left, I felt my shoulders a little lighter, not because the problem was smaller, but because it now had edges I could see. The next day, I went back to Alicia's office. She had already marked several pages with notes. We sat opposite each other at her neat desk. She spoke slowly, the way she always did when something mattered. She told me that, based on what we had now learned, there were steps I could take to protect myself and the people around the business. Some of these steps were simple changes to how payments could be made. Some were notices that would change who had the right to speak for the company in contracts. I listened carefully. I did not ask for drama. I asked for safety and fairness. I told her that I did not want staff to suffer. I did not want food deliveries to stop. I did not want the landlord to be forced into a legal chase. I only wanted the line between my support and Emma's choices to be clear. I also told her that I could not continue in a position where everyone saw my name as a filter for their mistakes, but refused to treat me as a partner. She nodded and began to prepare a set of papers. She did not describe them in dramatic terms. They were simply forms and letters that followed the rules we had all agreed on months before. As she did this, I watched her hands move with the same calm care she had shown at the first bank meeting. Back then, I had thought that these were just extra protections I would never need. Now, each line felt like a bridge I had built for myself long ago, without knowing when I would walk over it. When the papers were ready, she slid them across the desk to me. She explained each one in simple language. None of them were tricks. They were clear statements of my rights and my decisions as the main owner and guarantor. Some would take effect only if the restaurant missed certain duties again. Others were set to start as soon as they were delivered to the right people. I read them all. Then I signed where she pointed, in my slow, careful handwriting. I did not feel joy as I signed. I did not feel victory. I felt a heavy kind of peace. This was not about teaching someone a lesson. It was about putting reality in order. When we finished, Alicia said that she would send the necessary notices at the right times and keep copies ready. She told me that if anyone challenged my actions later, we would have a full record. I thanked her and left, carrying my folder under my arm like I had done many times in my working life. At home, in my office, I added my own notes on a separate sheet. I wrote down what I had signed and why, not in legal terms, but in my own words. I wrote that I would not agree to any more vague promises. I wrote that from now on, I would speak through the same systems that others used when it suited them: contracts, leases, bank forms, and clear letters. Reading those lines back to myself, I felt more like the man I had been before I retired. On the day of the strategy dinner, I took my time getting ready. I put on a clean shirt and a jacket. Nothing special, nothing new. In the mirror, I saw an older man with tired eyes but a straight back. I thought of Grace's question in the park, and promised myself that whatever happened this evening, I would be able to look her in the eye and say that I had acted with care. Before leaving, I opened the drawer of my desk and took out the now thicker folder. Inside were copies of the key agreements, my notes, and a few of Alicia's letters. I did not plan to wave them around. I only wanted them near me, a reminder that I was not just a father walking into a family argument. I was also the person the outside world would call if this place fell apart. When I arrived at the restaurant that evening, the street outside was busy. The sign above the door glowed softly. Through the windows, I could see people moving between tables, setting glasses and cutlery. It looked like any other calm evening start. I stepped inside. A staff member greeted me politely and led me toward the back, where Emma had said partners would gather before the dinner. The back office of the restaurant was small. There was a desk, a computer, and piles of papers in loose stacks. A corkboard on the wall held notes, schedules, and a printed list of online reviews. I stood there alone for a moment and let my eyes move over the room. This was the real heart of the place, more than the dining floor in front. Numbers, orders, staff lists, all the things that determined whether the warm lights outside could stay on. Emma came in a minute later, moving quickly. She was dressed to impress, hair done, makeup careful. She still looked tense under the paint. She thanked me for coming and said that she knew I would not let them fall. She spoke about the dinner as if it was a show. She said that tonight we would present a united front, reassure the worried, and show that all was under control. She added that after the dinner we could sort out the money details in a way that matched the story they wanted to tell. She mentioned that her parents had invited a local writer and someone who managed a social media page for New Places. She wanted them to see harmony, not conflict. She wanted me to play the calm older supporter in the background, nodding at the right moments. I listened without interrupting. When she stopped, I said in a quiet voice that I was not here to play a part in anyone's story. I told her that I would speak honestly about the situation, in simple terms, without drama and without hiding numbers. I also said that I would do so in a way that protected staff and suppliers, because they had not caused this. Her eyes narrowed slightly when I said that. She tried another angle. She said that if I made things sound too serious, people would panic and pull away. She said that this would hurt Daniel most of all. I answered that pretending everything was fine while bills piled up would also hurt Daniel, and in a deeper way. I told her that this evening was not just about feelings. It was about facts that would not go away because we smiled at them. There was a long pause. For a second, I thought she might argue more. Instead, she forced a small smile and said that she trusted that I would not ruin the atmosphere. She straightened a stack of papers on the desk, as if they were a set of cards, and said that guests were arriving and that we should go out soon. I nodded and picked up my folder. When I stepped from the back office toward the dining room, the sounds of talking and soft music reached me. I could hear chairs moving, glasses clinking, low laughter. I walked down the short hallway, my hand on the folder, my steps slow and steady. As I reached the door that led to the main floor, I stopped for just a second and took a breath. Then I pushed the door open and stepped through. The noise dipped for a moment as some heads turned. Behind me, I heard the door close with a soft click, like the start of a performance when the lights go down and everyone turns toward the stage. When I stepped into the dining room, the noise dropped a little. People sat at a long table in the center. At one end, Emma's parents were already in their seats, talking to a man I recognized as a local food writer. On the other side, I saw the supplier manager who had called me, a few staff members in clean shirts, and one or two people from Emma's circle who liked to advise on image. Daniel stood near the middle of the room in his kitchen jacket. He looked nervous, but he tried to smile when he saw me. Emma moved to the top of the table and lifted her glass. The soft music in the background lowered. People turned their heads toward her. She began with a warm tone. She thanked everyone for coming. She spoke about how proud she was of the restaurant and how these first months had shown them where they needed to grow. She said that there had been a few small cash issues, but that this was normal. She told the room that tonight they would share a clear plan for the future and show that all partners were united. As she spoke, she looked at me more than once, as if to signal that this was my cue to play the supportive father. She mentioned that her parents had been pillars of advice and that some key partners had helped with early momentum. She used that phrase again, built on their own, as if the money and signatures behind it were just wind. Then she said that she wanted to ask me, as a dear family member and supporter, to say a few words to calm everyone and confirm that all was fine. She looked at me with a bright smile that did not reach her eyes. People around the table turned their faces toward me. Some looked hopeful, others curious. I stood up slowly and placed my folder on the table in front of me. My hands were steady. I thanked Emma for the introduction. I thanked everyone for coming. I said that I was glad that we were all in one room at the same time because that made it easier to speak clearly. I began with simple facts. I told them that I had invested $500,000 into the restaurant. I said that I had done this not as a gift, but as a structured investment, with a written agreement, a share structure, and a clear role. I added that I had done this because I believed in my son's skill in the kitchen and wanted him to have a solid base. I watched the faces around the table as I spoke. Some were surprised by the number. Others seemed to already know it, but perhaps not the details. I said that in the past months there had been moments where my role was described in very light terms, as if I had only helped a little at the start. I said that this was not correct, either on paper or in reality. Then I opened the folder and took out a copy of the share agreement. I did not push it under anyone's nose. I simply placed it on the table where people could see the heading and the lines. I pointed to the section that listed the owners. I said that on this paper, my name stood next to 65% of the company. I said that this meant I was not only a helper, I was the main owner. I saw Emma's parents shift in their chairs. Emma's smile became stiff. Daniel stared at the paper with wide eyes, as if he was seeing it for the first time. The supplier manager leaned forward slightly, his face serious. I went on. I said that in recent days I had looked more closely at the accounts. I told them, in plain language, that many early expenses had gone into design, marketing, and events, while basic invoices for goods and some wages had been delayed. I said that this was not a moral judgment, just a description of what I had seen in the statements from the bank and the invoices in my folder. At this point, Emma's father tried to cut in. He said that new businesses often shifted money around and that we should not scare the room with heavy terms. I raised one hand slightly, not in anger, but to ask for another minute. I said that I respected experience, but that numbers did not change because we spoke gently about them. Then I took out a short letter from the landlord's office. I placed it next to the share agreement. I said that the lease for the building was not in the restaurant company's name, but in the name of my holding company. I explained in simple words that the restaurant was a subtenant. I said that there was a clause that allowed the main tenant to end the sublease if duties were not met, and that the landlord had confirmed this in writing. When I said this, Emma sat up straighter. She said that she had never agreed to give up control of her place. I answered calmly that she had signed the same agreements as everyone else at the first bank meeting. I pointed to the line where her name and signature appeared. I did not raise my voice. I let the document speak. Next, I addressed the suppliers and staff. I turned toward the supplier manager first. I said that I appreciated his call to me when invoices went unpaid. I told him that I had not taken that call lightly and that I had gone to his office to see the numbers myself. Then I told him, and everyone else, that I had already taken steps to protect him and his company. I explained that earlier that day, with Alicia's help, I had signed new agreements that moved key supplier contracts directly under my holding company in case of default. I said that I had also informed the landlord that if the subtenant kept missing duties, I was ready to take over the space and keep it running under a revised structure. I added that this was not a threat, but a plan to make sure that food kept coming in and staff kept their jobs. I turned to Daniel. I told him, in front of everyone, that my support for him as a chef had not changed. I said that if the company had to change shape, I still wanted him to stay in the kitchen as head chef, under a clear contract that protected him and the staff. I said that what could not continue was the current mix of image decisions and hidden risks. I saw his throat move as he swallowed. He looked at me, then at Emma, then back at me. For a moment, he did not speak. I knew that he was standing between two worlds. Emma's voice broke the silence. She said that I was trying to steal their dream with legal tricks. She said that I was using cold rules to take back what I had given. She said that this was not what family did. Her words came fast, like small stones. Some people at the table shifted in their seats, unsure where to look. I did not answer her in the same tone. I said that I had not written these rules alone. I reminded her that we had all sat together at the bank, with the same agreements in front of us. I said that she had liked being called founder when the banker used that word. I added that part of being a founder is accepting the structure you sign. I reached into the folder one more time and took out a simple summary sheet. On it were 3 points in my own handwriting. I had written them for myself, but now they also fit the room. I said that I had decided 3 things. First, I said that I would no longer send personal money into the current company without a written plan and clear limits. Second, I said that as majority owner, I had already filed a notice that changed the management structure. From that day, I would act as the main decision maker on financial matters until debts were under control. Third, I said that if unpaid invoices and late rent continued, I would use my rights in the lease to end the sublease and reopen the restaurant under a new company with new management while offering positions to staff and to Daniel. I did not say these things as threats. I spoke them as simple next steps. Alicia had already filed some of these notices earlier in the day. Others were ready to send if needed. I made this clear. I told them that this was not a future idea. It was a present reality. Emma's parents reacted with shock. Her mother put a hand to her mouth. Her father said that I could not just push their daughter out of her own place. I answered that I was not pushing anyone. I was following the agreements and protecting the people who had no say in the past choices, staff, suppliers, and the landlord. I said that anyone who wanted to stay and work under clear rules would have a chance. I could feel the mood in the room change. The supplier manager's face relaxed a little. One of the staff members looked at me with something like relief. Even the food writer looked more interested now, not in gossip, but in the reality of the business behind the pretty plates. Emma stood up halfway from her seat, then sat down again. She looked at the papers on the table as if they were something dirty. She said that she would not accept being treated like a child. I said that I was not treating her as a child. I was treating her as an adult who had taken public credit for a business without taking care of its basic duties. I ended my speech there. I told them that I was open to quiet, separate talks after the dinner with anyone who wanted to understand the details. I said that staff and suppliers would receive clear written updates in the coming days about how bills would be paid and who would sign future agreements. I also said that any future launch events would not take place until the foundation was sound. I saw 1 or 2 people nod at that. Then I closed the folder and placed my hand on top of it for a moment. I looked at Daniel. I told him that my door would always be open to him as my son, but that tonight I had spoken as the person everyone in this room would be left with if things fell apart. I said that I hoped he would think about what that meant. I did not stay for food. I did not wait for more speeches. I picked up my folder and stepped back from the table. The room was very quiet now. The music in the background had stopped at some point. I walked toward the door, feeling all the eyes on my back. As I reached the entrance, I turned slightly and saw Emma leaning over the table, staring at the contract pages where her own signature sat next to mine. Daniel stood beside her, not touching her, his face pale. The supplier manager was still seated, looking down at the letters as if they were a map out of a storm. I opened the door and stepped outside. Behind me, the soft sound of chairs moving and low whispers began, but I did not turn around. The restaurant door closed with a firm click, and for the first time in months, the weight on my shoulders felt like something I had chosen to carry in the right way.